If you're a Max user like me, I'm sure you have used scripts before in your workflow. How about we make our own scripts to improve our workflow? That is exactly what I'll show you in part 2 of Maxscript series. We'll create this simple material library with simple features. Before I begin, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe if you have not subscribed yet. Also, let me know in the comments what topics you want me to cover in the next part. Here is the demo of the script. So I've got these 4 different materials and there are some features here. I'll show you what it does. So I can select any object and click on this button and it will apply that material to that object. Let's try with the other one. And all of them works. Now I've got some features here I'll show you. I can select one of the object, hit a pick material, and I can pick any of these objects and it will pick the materials from that object. Can do it for the other ones, can do it from here. Okay, now I have another button here which selects the similar objects. Any objects with same material in the scene, it will select it, as you can see that. Same thing with that. Now there are some of the objects which are blue here, which means they don't have any material assigned to it. I have another button that will select all those objects that does not have any material. If I click that, it should select all of those. So in this series, I will show you exactly how to make this script and also explain all the things that we do. Hope you guys are ready. Alright, before we tackle the toolbox, let's get the basics out of the way. I'll show you how you can access various materials, their properties, and create materials using Maxscript. First of all, let's look at the material editor and how we can access these individual materials that are on each slots. Let's open a help file by pressing F1 on a keyboard. That should open a browser. Now on the enter keyword, I'm going to type in material editor. Now this will give us the result for everything, not just for Maxscript. So we want to filter that. So we can go here on the information category and click on developers documentation and click on Maxscript. Now all the search results are only for Maxscript. Let's click the top one that says material editor, and on the first one here is get Midi Material and slot index. So let's go ahead and see how we can use that. I'm going to type in get Midi Material. Now the slot index will be 1, 2, 3 up to 24. Let's try 1 and hit enter. Now it gives me this bricks Corona material. So my first material is Corona material and it's named as bricks. Let's try with the second one, which is a fabric, also another Corona material. I'll change the slot index to 2 and it works. Now that we know how to access it, let's store this material into a variable. I'll call it mat1 is equals to get Midi Material 1. Now we have our first material, that's a brick material, stored in a variable called mat1. Now let's go back to our help file. And down here you see set Midi Material. Now that's how you can set a material into a different slot. Let's try slot 5. I'll do set Midi Material. Let's go back to our help file to see the syntax. Now it says slot index, then give it a material. Okay, same as before, slot index, that will be slot 5. And we need to give it a material, so we have already stored our bricks into material 1. So mat1 variable, I'll do that enter, and you can see it copies our bricks on slot 5. Now let's go ahead and see how we can access all of these materials. So there is a simple function called Emitted Materials. Now this will give you all the materials in all of these slots from 1 to 24. Now at the moment it doesn't display anything, but if I do for mat in Midi Materials, do print mat.name. Now this should print out all the name of all the materials from slot 1 to 24. Now if you're not aware of for loops, make sure go and watch my first part. That's where I explain all of these basic things in much more detail. So on this part, I'll skip explaining those. that was how to access the materials from the material editor slots. Now let's look at how we can access materials from the geometry itself. I'll minimize this, and I have got a bunch of materials here in my scene. Let me clear the listener. Now let me select the first object here, and if I hit $.material, this should give me the material for that object. If I select one of the other object here and hit $.material, now this geometry does not have any materials applied to it, so the result should give me undefined, which is true. Let me go back to my brick material, and I'm going to store this one again into a new variable, mat1, as we did before, $.material. Now I want to apply this same material to this other object. I can do $.material is equals to mat1. Now that object has the same material as well. Now let's check the class of materials. Now if I do class of $.material, it should give me Corona material. Now that's exactly how you create a new material as well. So if you just copy this, paste it, and give it two brackets, it will create a new material. Let's see how we can add that to our material editor slot. Let's go up here, and I'll replace the first slot with a basic Corona material. So I'll do set Midi Materials, material slot 1, and I'll give it Corona material. And as you can see, it refreshes, and now it's got a default Corona material. You can do the same with the geometries as well. I can select this, and I can do $.material is equals to Corona MTL. Now this is just with the Corona material, but you can do that with any other material. For an example, let's try a different type of material. If I click here, go to material, I can use a physical material and see class of. Now I need to use this slot here, so I have to do get Emitted Material slot 1. That'll give me physical material. Now that's how you create a physical material. Let's try it in adding that in a slot 2. Set Emitted Material slot 2. I will create physical material. That should create that. Now let's look at the properties of the material. I'll clear this. Show $.material. Now this should show us all the properties that the material that's applied to this object has, which is a lot. Right. Now I can access individual settings. For an example, the diffuse color. If I go all the way down again, $.material.diffuse color. I think there's probably a typo there. Color diffuse, sorry. Copy this and enter, and it gives me the color. I'm going to open my material editor again, and I'll create a new material on my first slot. So set Emitted Material slot 1, and I'm going to do Corona MTL. Create a new material. Now I'm going to change the property, the color diffuse, to a red color. For that, I'm going to use the function called Midi Materials that we saw before. Midi Materials, and I'm going to do the slot 1 dot color diffuse is equals to, now it takes color value, so I'm going to do 255, 0, 0, which is R, G, and B. So the first value is for red. And if I hit enter, you can see the diffuse color now changed to red. You don't have to create the material first and then change the value. You could actually do that while you create the material. So let's see how we can do that. I'll use the Midi Materials again. 1 is equals to Corona MTL. And instead of doing two brackets, I will do color diffuse, and I give a colon. This time I'm going to make it blue. So 0, 0 on the green, and 255 on blue. Now if I hit enter, it should create a blue Corona material on the first slot. Before we start creating our material library using Maxscript, I'll show you how you can save your created materials. So this one we are not going to do with Maxscript. I'll just show you how you can do it within Material Editor. So if you hit this Get Material button, you can create a new material library and you can save it in a location. Let me save it here, and I will name it my library. All right, now I can start adding my materials here one by one, and then I can right click and save this material library. Now I can just close this one, but I can always load it. Open material library, go to the same directory, and I can load that. I can use this, but this is not visually pleasing. So we want to create a script or UI that has a proper preview, and we can easily use that to apply it to our object in the scene. Let's start creating our UI. Now I'm going to go a bit faster because I've already explained all of these in my first part. First thing first, let's create our rollout. Rollout, I'll name it Material Toolbox, and I'll name it Material Tools. I'll give it a width of 300, maybe 340. Okay, and open and close parentheses, and I'll do a create dialog Material Toolbox. Now this should create a simple dialog here, but every time we run it, it will create a new dialog, so we will go ahead and destroy it before it even opens. So I'll do try destroy dialog Material Toolbox catch. Now I have explained all of these in my part 1. Make sure to watch that if you haven't watched yet. All right, let's start creating our UI elements. I'll create a button, name it btn underscore. So this one's going to be our first material, which is the brick material. Let's do brick MTL. I don't need any caption for this, and I'll do a width of 150, height 150. Let's see what it does. So you can see we've got a nice big button. Now we need to make sure we apply a bitmap texture to it. So we need to give a path to our bitmap file. So I've got some previews here. So these are previews from Corona's default material library. So I just saved some of them out, and I've renamed these exactly what our materials are called, so it's easier for us to pick it up. So I'll just copy this path here, and on top here I'll just make a variable called preview files, actually preview file path, and then I'll just give this path here, and at the end I'll make sure I'll add 2 backslashes so that when I actually run this, and then you can run a single line of script by hitting Shift and Enter. Now let's expand this. You can see we get this 1 backslash at the end. That's what we want. That's why we did 2 backslashes there. If I just put 1, it thinks that everything after that is still a text. Okay, so we just want to close that. All right, now that we have a path, now in order to add an image to a button, let's go and look at the help file quickly. Got here. Now I'll type in button here. And let's go to developers documentation and Maxscript. Image button, that's not actually what we want. We want button UI control. Okay, now if you look at the first one, which is the syntax, there is button images, which sounds exactly what we need, but we are actually going to use the icon name. and it needs a file name. Okay, let's go down here, and I'm going to do an icon name. So remember our file path there, which is preview file path. Now this one does not have the exact file name, so I will do a plus sign here and give it a bricks.jpg. Don't remember if I had s at the end on my file name there. No, I only have brick. Okay, get rid of the s. Let's try running the script, Control E. Now we get a little error. Right, so I can do the plus sign there. I need to make sure I have all of these inside a parenthesis, the bracket. Let's do that and Control E. Now it works. Now our image is really tiny. Now we want to scale that up. So for that, we can use icon size. Okay, let me expand this a little bit. Right, I hit space, icon size, and I will give it 140, 140. Let's run it again. Now you can see the image is scaled up. Now if you might be wondering why not 150, 150, because that's the size of our button. What happens is if I do 150, 150, it will cover our entire button, and when we hover our mouse, we can't see any action in that. That's why I reduced the size down by 10, so that when we actually run it, you can see the button grays out when we hover, so we know that's the one we are selecting. Now let's do the same thing for the next button. Copy all of these, do that, and I'm going to name this fabric. Change the brick.jpg to fabric.jpg. Everything else should be fine. And Control E. That's great. Now the only problem is that the next button is right below our first button, but I want it right next to it. In order to do that, I'll just use another parameter called across and set it to 2. Now they should be next to each other. Okay, now the next one, I'm fine for it to be below. So I'll just copy all of this, go down, and I'm going to name this one glass, and this one glass.jpg as well. This all depends on what material you have. All these names are just examples. If you have a metal material, make sure to name it metal so it's easier for you to understand. I'll set this one to across 2 as well. And let's go ahead, do one more copy paste, and the final one would be concrete, and name the file concrete as well. Let's see, everything looks fine so far. Now if you remember from the example I showed earlier, we have a few more buttons down there. Let's go ahead and create those as well. There are more buttons. I'll name it btn_similar. So this one will select objects with similar material, and I'll give it a name select similar. So this one will be displayed in the button on the UI, and I can give it a tooltip which actually only displays the message when you hover over the button. I'll show you in a second what that actually means. Select objects with same material. Let's give it a width of 150 and height of 50. Let's see this. So as you can see, this text after the variable is displayed on the button, and when I hover it, it displays the tooltip. Now I want another button, so I'll do across 2, and the next one will be another button, btn_undefined. So now all of these are variables, so it doesn't matter what name they are. I just put btn in front so that it's easier to understand for me later that that variable refers to the button in the UI. So select Undefined, tooltip. I'll do select objects with no material. Now I can copy the width and height. Now the last button is going to be different. It was the pick material, so we can pick the material from a different object. For this one, we're not going to use just a button, we're going to use a pick button. Now if you go to the help file, type in UI control, or let's actually go and navigate from here. I'll show you how you can navigate from here as well. So if you go down to Maxscript help, let's get down to Maxscript tools and interaction with 3ds Max, 3ds Max script tools, and there should be, let me find out, scripted utilities and rollout user interface. Now at first you definitely not know that's where you need to go, so that's why you need to use a keyword. So you could do rollout and then go to developers documentation and Maxscript. Sometimes I find it easier to just go and browse through those, and sometimes I like to use a keyword. It just totally depends up to you. So I'll go to rollout user interface controls and click on this rollout user interface control types. Now this one here shows you about every single button or any other UI element. Here you should be able to find out pick button here. Now if I click that, now it's a pick button, same, you need a variable, you can give it a caption or a tooltip, and you can also give it a message. Let's go here. And I'll do a pick button. For this one, I'll go PKBTN so that I know that it's a pick button, and this one will be pick material. Now this one again, pick material for the display text, and then for tooltip, pick any object to copy materials from. Right, and so this time, because we don't have another one to go next to it, we're going to make it a little bigger. So we'll give it a width of 308 and height of 50. Now if you're wondering where did I get these numbers from, 308, 150, it's because I've made these scripts before and I know those values work fine for our UI. That's why I'm using it, but if you are doing it for the first time, you might want to experiment with that to get the right size. Let's make sure nothing's wrong, and we've got our 4 different materials and 3 other buttons. All right, now we'll go ahead and start assigning events to each of these buttons, so when we click it, it'll perform the certain actions. Okay, we'll start by adding events to our materials first. So now we need to access those materials that we created earlier and saved into a material library. If you remember, we saved all of our 4 materials in mylibrary.mat. Now we need to be able to access it from there. Now the way to access it is, I'll show you how you can get that information. Hit F1 once again, go to the help file, and I'll type in material library, developers documentation, Maxscript, material library values. Now that's where you get it from. Now let's go down. There should be some get material, get Midi Material. That's for the material editor slot. Now here it is, load material library, but we don't want to load the material library. We just want to access the file from there. So keep going down. Now load temp material library. That's what we want. Good. I'll show you what the difference is between the load material library and load temp material library is. Let's go here. I'll copy the path. So if you shift right click on your Windows, you can copy as path. Let's go ahead and load material real library. Sorry. And I can paste the path. Now before I hit enter, let's open up my material editor. And if I go to get material, I don't have any material libraries loaded at the moment. Now if I hit enter here and go there you can see the temporary library, it's already loaded all that materials here. Now that's not what I want. Now if I do load temp material, however, this will not create any temporary files and not load our materials, which means our script is going to be much faster. It doesn't have to load all those materials into memory and onto our Macs. Okay, but we can still access all those materials. Now once we load it, we need to store it somewhere in a variable. So we'll create my MTL lib, or whatever is easier for you to name. Now I can access the materials by doing my MTL lib and giving it an index from 1 to 4. Remember, we saved 4 materials in there. So the first one should be our bricks, my MTL lib, second should be fabric, and so on. All right, let's go ahead and add that to our UI here. Now I'm going to wrap this one into a function because we have 4 different buttons and all of them need to access a separate index. So the brick material should access the first index, fabric second, glass third, and concrete fourth. So we have 4 different tasks. We're going to repeat that. So we'll wrap it into functions so we don't have to write all the codes 4 times. Let's create a function with fn and give a function name. I'll give it MTL library. Now we need to give it few inputs. First would be giving it the objects where the material will be applied. So I'll give it obj_arr. So this is just a variable holder. It does not have any information at the moment. You could put this one as just obj or anything else, doesn't matter. And I'm going to give another variable as an index, and we'll go ahead and create 2 of our brackets. Now same as we did in the listener, I'll just do a temp lib. It's just a variable which will hold our temporary material library, and we'll give it a path, which is that. Now, in order to assign the materials from this library to the selected object, we can do for, I'll just set that to ARR. I'm so used to using these variables. So for obj in obj ARR, do obj.material is equals to tmp lib. And so instead of giving it 1, 2, 3, or 4, we're going to put an index here so that we can reference this one later when we actually click the buttons. All right, now that we have created that function, let's go ahead and assign that to our buttons. Now we want to do when we click the button, so we will do on btn underscore brick MTL pressed do. Now we want to call our function the material library, MTL library, which requires 2 inputs, as you remember. So object ARR means selection of objects, so I'll give it selection as array. And the next one is index. So if you remember, the brick material was on the first slot, so we give it 1. Now we can go ahead and repeat the same thing for all of our buttons. Now, if we did not make this function, then we would have to type this 2-line code for all of the 4 buttons. Now, this one's very simple, so we only have 2 lines, but there could be multiple lines of code. and which then we'll have to repeat for 4 different buttons, which is why we do function as well. Let's change this to fabric, and everything else stays the same except for the index, which is going to be 2. Repeating this, copy paste, put that glass here, and 3. Once again, final time, it will be concrete. Concrete, and the index will be 4. Let's go ahead and test if we have done anything wrong so far. First, let me save my script just to be safe. Save. Material tools. I'll just give it _tutorial. Save it. All right. Let's load our script. All right. No errors so far. Let's select some objects. I'll do some at the back here and hit the brick material. Seems it's fine. Select the other 3 here. Do the fabric. Seems fine. The glass seems to be working, and the concrete is working as well. Awesome. We've done great so far. Now all we need to do is create some more functions for these 3 buttons to do their tasks. Now the first function in our UI is select similar. So I'll create another function here. Function select. Now this is just a variable, so you can give it anything. For this one, we just need the selected objects. So I'll put another variable here as selected object is equals to, get that. Now, when we're trying to select similar objects that has same materials, we only want the user to be picking only one object, because if they have 2 objects, there could be multiple materials, which we don't want. So we want them to only pick one object. So we need to create a condition here. So when the viewers or the user select more than one object, we need to give them an error message. So let's try that. So if I do if, remember the selected objects will be on this variable here, sclobj.count is not equal to, which is the exclamation and the equal to sign means not equal to 1. So it could be either 0 or 2, 3, 4, any other numbers other than 1. Then we want to give them a message, then message box, select only one object. Else, if the selected object is only 1, then we can go ahead and perform our function, which is selecting other objects that have same materials. Now first, let's go ahead and store the material of the current object. So for an example, if I'm selecting this object and I want all the other objects in the scene that have same material to be selected, I need to make sure, or I need to let the program know what this object, the object that's selected, has, which material it has. So what I'll do is current material, it's a variable, and I will assign it by using sclobj, the first one, because we only have one, dot material. Now this will store the material of this object into this variable called current material. Now we'll go ahead and check in the scene if any other object has the same material. So for obj in objects, so this is going to run the loop over all the objects in the scene, and it will store individual objects in the obj variable at a time, where obj.material is equals to current material. Do select more obj. So what I'm doing here, basically go through all the objects in the scene, and on each iteration store that individual objects in obj variable and check if the obj.material is equals to the current material. And if so, go ahead and select that object. Now this should do the trick. Now we need to assign this function to the button here. So let's go down here on btn underscore similar pressed do, I just need to do scl similar, calling the functions again. It needs one input, which will be the selection as array. Okay, let's go ahead and test it. Now let's try not selecting anything and hit the button. It gives me the error saying select only one object. Let's try selecting multiple objects, select similar. It again gives me the same error. But now if I just select one object and hit select similar, it selects the materials with the same object. Let's try with another one here. Just select one object, select similar, and it selects all the other objects that have same material. Awesome. All right, we're almost there. Let's do the select undefined. This one's even easier. I'll just do a function select undefined, same as before. I'll just give it another variable, and for this one we don't even need to do any check. I'll just do for obj in objects, where obj dot material is equals to undefined. Do select more obj. Now assign that to our button again on btn underscore undefined pressed to select undefined. And selection as array. All right. My computer is running really slow, so every time I type something, it'll only show up at the end. It's probably because I'm recording. Doesn't really happen that usually. I hope that's not a problem for you guys. Really sorry about that. Let's do a test for this one. And let's hit the button. It selects all the object that does not have materials on it. Right, the final one now, pick material. Let's create another function and we'll name it pick material. Now for this one again, we need two different variables. The first one will be objects that are selected. The second one will be the object that will be picked when you click this button here. So I'll give it two variables. I'll do obj arr and I'll do another one called picked. And let's go. So this time again, we need to do a quick condition. If there is no object selected, we can't do anything. So if obj arr dot count is equals to 0, then message box no object selected, else for obj in obj arr do obj dot material is equals to picked dot material. So what we did here, basically same as before, we are going through a for loop. We're going through all the objects in our selection, storing them into obj on each iteration, and go ahead and apply the material on the picked object, which we'll pass in later here, from the pick object, and assign that to those individual objects on our selection. Let's quickly create an event and I'll show you how it works. So we go on button underscore, sorry, that was a different name, pkbtn underscore pick material. Now this one is not going to be pressed because we are not pressing the button, we are picking the button. Sorry, I forgot, this didn't type before, so just doing it quickly. Pick material, so not pressed, picked. Now this one's a little bit different than just a simple button, because when you pick something, you need to store that somewhere in a variable. So we had to do here, I'll just do selected obj, SCL obj. So that's where it will store the picked geometry, and do pick underscore material, which is our function that we created earlier, pick. Now remember, we have two inputs. First is object array, so that will be selection as array, and we need to give the picked object, which will be stored in selected obj. So we'll do SCL obj. All right, let's go ahead and do the test. Let's try it with all of these geometries here, and we'll try and pick the brick material for that. Now pick and click the brick material, and it works. Now let's make sure if we have nothing selected, it will give us a message box as well. So without selecting anything, let's do pick material and try to pick on something. It should give me no object selected. All right, awesome. That's all for today. I hope I tried to explain everything. I know I went a little bit faster because a lot of the things that's covered here, I have explained it in my previous part. So if you haven't watched that yet, please go ahead and watch it. If you want to know anything in more detail, hit me on the comment section. Let me know what you don't understand. If I need to, I'll make another smaller videos explaining each things in more detail. So just let me know if you want more explanation, or if you want to know about anything else. If you want any other topics covered on the next part, just write me on the comment section, and I'll try my best to cover whatever you guys want. Alright guys, thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. See you guys next time. Bye.